And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. And it's been a bigger story for the last 1 week, entering 2 weeks now. But there are a few things that I want to break it down for you first before we have the conversation. As you know, the latest on this today, I'm talking about the Achimota Forest Land Saga, is that Corruption Watch has petitioned the special prosecutor, and they want the prosecutor to do something very specific. Investigate the alleged state lands belonging to the late Kojo Usifriye. You know him popularly as Sir John. And this is the matter relating to his will, alleged will, which has been circulating for a while now since Sunday evening. The Corruption Watch, under the auspices of CDD, wants that investigated because we've seen a few things in there that has raised a few eyebrows. Now, according to the Corruption Watch, it is an offense for a person to use public office for personal profit. Now, the reason why this is important is, Sir John, when he was alive, he's now late, of course, was a CEO of the Forestry Commission. And then you see in his will, we'll go to some of the things that were found in his will that has triggered this petition very shortly. But then you see in his will, him willing off parts of the forest, Achimota forest, to people who are close to him or relatives or family. Corruption Watch says that is an offense for if indeed it's established. If indeed it's established. All this, as at this point, is not proving. Nothing is proving. Everything else that we've heard are allegations subject to investigations, either by the special prosecutor. The will itself is a subject of contestation in court. And so a lot of this is yet to be proving, by the way. But the point that Corruption Watch is making is that if it is proving, then it's definitely going to be an offense for a person to use public office for personal profit. And they also believe that the late Sir John abuses public office and dishonestly used it for his private benefit if, again, it is established, right? So that's the basis for the petition that they put before the special prosecutor. They're also asking that the SP, the special prosecutor, establish how the state lands, including the several acres of land situated at the Achimota Forest and Ramsar sites in Achimota, were secured by the late Sir John. Again, this is an issue that the special prosecutor will have to look at. I checked with the special prosecutor's office. They believe it's something that they would be dealing with pretty shortly in terms of looking at it, the petition, and they'll have to respond to the petitioner. So we'll get to know a bit of that pretty shortly. So what really is in the purported will, and that has become such a huge matter of controversy? You see in the will a few things that we want to focus on. This is just to do with the relevant issues surrounding the Achimota Forest and the Ramsar sites. In that will, it says, I gave my land situate at the Achimota Forest, and that is the key point here, at the Achimota Forest, in the name of, and they list the individuals who should go, who will get it, but also the names in which the lands are registered, okay? So you will find that Kojo Usifriye's name, the name is not on the document, it's not on the will in terms of the ownership of the land, but it says Jacquet Pro Limited owns 5.41 acres there. The key question to ask is if the will is proven to be authentic, etc. But the man is willing it off to people, right? If he doesn't own it, how is he able to will it, right? And one of the things that the Corruption Watch is asking the SP to do is to remove the veil, is to go down to beneficial owners. So who are the beneficial owners when it comes to this particular 5.41 acres? Yes, it's the name of the company, but we have to pierce this veil, is what they're asking for. The Faso Limited, it's 0.987 acres. And then he also has land he owns jointly with Charles Owusu, one piece of land, all in the Achimota Forest. And then DML Limited, again, joint ownership. The acreage is not disclosed, right? So that is what the special prosecutor is supposed to look into. And then we have the Ramsar site. Of course, this is a ecologically very sensitive site and protected for reasons of ecology and protecting the balance as far as the environment is concerned. And again, the will, Sir John is purported to have said, and it's in the will has a subject of contestation, I give my land situated at the Ramsar area at Sakumono in the Greater Accra region and measuring 5.07 acres to my sisters. Again, we've seen when he was alive himself, he was against the Ramsar site being developed by those who have bought lands there. And so that definitely raises serious questions of conflict of interest, etc., if indeed it is proving, right? So we've seen things just happen, swift response by the sector minister who had been on top of this from day one, briefing the public and providing clarity on a few issues, but also taking decisive action on a few other things. Now, the ministry, issued a statement that clarified a few things. That one, they had no record of ownership of lands at the Achimota forest in Ramsar, but also in the name of Kojo Usufrie. But that is understandable because, of course, one, as you see, the lands themselves were not in the name of Kojo Usufrie. But secondly, because that place was not degazetted, at the time that I believe, and this again is subject to verification by the SP and others, had not been degazetted, it was still a forest reserve. The Lands Commission would not register land there because it was a forest reserve. And so you would possibly hold an indenture, but you won't hold a title, right? And so that's why if you check with the Lands Commission, you will not find a registration then. This is indeed a factual matter that the minister put in this document. Directive also was issued then to the Lands and Forestry Commission to deem any ownership of the lands, both in the Achimota Forest and the Sakumono Ramsar site by the late Kojo Usufrie void. And that was the first decisive decision that the sector minister took, saying you can't have it, it's void. Even if you did, you can't have it, it's void. So that's a decisive decision by the minister as far as this is concerned. Now, what we wanted to do for you when it comes to the acreage, remember that this all started because of the conversation around the original owners. They were called the Owu family. And what I find interesting is that the Owu family had petitioned almost every government in our republic for a very long time. And they petitioned almost every minister too in the Lands and Natural Resources Ministry. And all the governments since John Kufuor had agreed with the Owu family that they were entitled to part of the forest that had been degraded and called the peripheral areas. Okay, so we said, let's track for you, because the acreage that each of the administrations had awarded to the Owu family had varied, had changed over time. So we give you one snapshot of the journey of the acreage, which is at the heart of this matter as well. And something very interesting will begin to emerge. And so when you look at this, if I may just expand it a bit more, right? You will find that this started in 2007, okay? And then into 2008, there was an agreement that was signed where the John Kufuor administration, under the sector minister, had an agreement with the Owu family to give out 90 acres to them, right? And then you come to, before this could be executed, the government changed hands after 2008 elections. Then the John Mills administration then sets up a committee. They came to the same conclusion that the Owu family were entitled to some compensation and they were going to do so with the land. Then they said, this is the Afaridate Committee. Afaridate Committee then agrees that instead of 90, the Owu family deserved more. Right? And so they gave 180. And the reason for this is on compassionate grounds, right? So they gave them, and they found that their position, the Owu family position on the matter was justified. So they gave them 118. So this is a jump from 90 to 118, right? And then, after that, and we found, documents that make this, that backs this claim that it was 90 in Kufuor, and then 118. In fact, the ministry has released some documents to back this particular point here. And then in 2013, when was being executed, there were 3 different acres that was broken down. Down it became 148 acres in 2013. In 2014, it then became 198 acres. So you see that it keeps changing. You come to the current president in his first term. The first time they engaged it, they reviewed it again to 329. I'll tell you why very shortly. I'll go through that for you very shortly. And then you come to 2021, it became 355, and then it ends now with the current one that has generated the controversy at 361. So that is the journey it's traveled, and you see that it's traveled a fair bit, and each of the governments had come, looked at it, and decides to give more, and incrementally it's gone. Okay, so why is this? Why is this? Now this tells a very interesting story. The total forest area, if you look at the documents going back, and the Forestry Commission has been very transparent in releasing the history, giving us a certain background to this and traveling. And so a lot of documents, it's documents that it's in the possession of the ministry, and they've been magnanimous enough to let us all read. And they've been updating. Today there have been further documentation that the ministry and that the current minister had done, and of course in their bid to be transparent on this very important matter. We've seen the total acreage being 1,185. That's all the way back to the 1920s. And so if you take what is being given to the Owu family currently, we are talking about some 30% of the forest that has been given, right? So remaining 69% of that is left. And we've seen the ministry show evidence. They took journalists there to show them that we are planting more trees there. And from what I understand, on the 10th of June, there'll be more trees planted there to afforest the place. And some funding has been secured for that to happen in this area here, in the 69% of the forest that is still untouched. And so the reasons for the various increases is important. So first, in 2006, when a petition was first sent, registered for the release of the enclosed lands of the Achimota forest, then the second petition came in, and if you track to the agreement that was reached for the 90 acres, the release could not be executed, as I've explained, and so it moved to the next government. The first, in 2019, the outcome was government concluded that a request for the release of the portion of the land is legitimate and reasonable. So that was the first reason under the Mills administration. The committee found that the area the family was requesting was a prime section of the reserve where the forest is richest. Okay, so this is the first reason why there was an increase from 90 to 118. The forest is richest where the Kufuor administration gave you. This is under Mills. We have found in the new government that it is richest. So we can't give you that anymore. We'll give you something else. But we need to compensate you for that. So they decide to compensate them. In the decision to compensate them, they led to increasing the acreage for them. So that then leads to this. And then we fast forward to 2013, the same committee, they again looked into it. By the time they were being executed, they broke it down into this, and then they increased it to 148, right? And then you come to 2014, again, there were some variations, okay? And by deed of variation, the Forest Commission granted Owu family 50 more acres, bringing the total acreage to 198. So that's where we got to the 198. And then you come to 2018, again, done. The commission wrote to the Owu family, indicating that the portion that they were already got from the previous administration, there were sensitive, installations there, a nursery and a seismology. So you can't have it. Although you have it, we have to take it back from you. Again, Owu family raised an objection. You have to compensate that because even the areas you are proposing to give us less value. So give us something more to compensate for what we had before. And then that leads to a further increase to 329. Okay. So then you track that to the currently. Then by the time that they actually want to now get the Lands Commission involved, Lands Commission also goes to the site, does its own survey, and realized that what the Forestry Commission all along had been using was not accurate. And so they did the accurate reading and found a discrepancy between 329, and they said the actual acreage in question that they were entitled to, if you do the actual reading, is 355. And so that then leads to a further increase, of course. And then the commission then explained that the through the analysis and field visit to the forest, reveals that there have been discrepancies in the estimation of the total area of the Achimota forest. And of course, then we end up with what we currently have. Again, following a field visit and validation, the Lands Commission submitted a validated schedule and site plan that leads to this. So this has traveled a fair bit across the board. But my guests are joining me for a conversation on this. It's raised so many issues, from the Sir John matter to the current issues. The minister obviously has said there's going to be an audit into this, and we understand that the special prosecutor may also be looking into this. There's a whole number of issues that we need to look at. It's asset declaration issue here, but how do you resolve this matter in a way that, I guess, serves the ultimate interest of the public? My guests will join with your thoughts after the break. My guest tonight, Gilfred Isiama, research analyst with CDD Ghana, of course with Corruption Watch, Mary Ada, senior programs and research officer, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, Adam Senanu is the co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption, Martin Kpebu is a constitutional lawyer. Gilfred, let me start with you. You petitioned the special prosecutor today. What do you want the special prosecutor to do about the issues specifically relating to the purported will of Sir John?
Well, thanks, Evans. We are looking to the special prosecutor to help us understand the circumstances leading to the acquisition of the said properties as stated in the will of the late Sir John. And again, some of the key issues that bother on the fight against corruption, issues that have relationship with conflict of interest, issues about assets declaration, whether it was done before he assumed office or he did it at any point in time when he was in office. We also want the special prosecutor to investigate issues in relation to beneficial owners of the said companies as stated in the will of Mr. Kojo Owusu Efriye. We believe that when he does these things, it will help us to unravel how sometimes state assets get into individuals, and especially people who are put in charge of public office with resources and power who get to exercise discretion in how they use state resources. So we are interested in these matters, and we believe that if the auditor, the special prosecutor, helps us to understand these things, apart from helping us to understand the extent and even all the people involved, because in the beneficial ownership, we get to understand people who are related to some of these things that have happened. But again, it is very critical for building trust in public institutions. Sometimes these issues happen, and the way we treat the issues, we talk about it and it dies down, thinking that the issues have just gone or died out, but it affects the trust that the people have in these public institutions. And in the long term, it undermines the legitimacy of the democratic regime that we are practicing. So we are looking to the special prosecutor to help us understand some of these issues.
Martin, are these issues as it relates to Sir John's will, purported will, within the purview of the special prosecutor? Is he empowered to look into stuff like that?
Yes, to the extent that if it's looking for the criminal element, so corruption. Remember, the right of the special prosecutor is about corruption and corruption-related offenses. So that basically, once you are looking for an issue of the matter of a person having used his public office for private gain, then yes, the person to talk to is the special prosecutor. So he'll be looking to see that, okay, when were these properties acquired? Was it during the time Sir John was CEO? Or even if he wasn't CEO at the time, what were the circumstances? was he in a position to influence? And thankfully, Mr. Owusu, is it Charles Owusu is still alive, right? So he can be a very key witness. And I think the other officers of the Forestry Commission. So it's okay that a report has been made to the special prosecutor so that he tackles the corruption and corruption-related angle. Then the complaint has been made to Shraj. Shraj will look at the conflict of interest angle because conflict of interest matters has been given to Shraj to handle under the Constitution. Okay, you are looking at Article 287 and the other provisions. So it's good. You remember the one time this U.S. matter of Trump's one of Trump's appointees. Is it Mad Dog or so? No, the elections, Trump's elections, as to whether there was foreign influence. In the U.S., there were 17 organizations separate that investigated it. So sometimes in our situation, it may also happen 2 or 3 state institutions tackling different angles. Yes, but they should speak to each other. It's very good that whilst they are working in silos, they should actually break down the silos and talk to each other so that they can share some information to help in the investigations, right?
Yeah, I mean, Adam, before even the special prosecutor will start his work, and today I checked with them, they say, yeah, they're pretty certain that they should be looking into this, getting a response to these corruption work very shortly. But before they could do that, you know, the minister had already taken a firm decision on this, saying, one, the directing both Lands Commission, Forest Commission, that the lands in the will are void, and that it will not pass to beneficiaries. Does that help matters at all, even before the special prosecutor gets underway to look into this matter?
Obviously, it does. I mean, it's good for the minister to take a position that we can hold him accountable to. And it's actually just the logic of it. Obviously, without an EI making certain portions available, nobody could claim having ownership to land or land titles in spaces which are not available. But the statement that they're going to ensure that nobody benefits, even if they have such documents, is good for us as citizens of this nation, because then you can hold government accountable to cross-check. But we ought to go beyond that, because the existence of a will that outlines such a large number of land and properties across this, this space suggests that there could be many more people who have such documentation and expectant that at some point they will have their titles and so on and so forth. So we need to find out what transpired, and the work by the special prosecutor, by Traj, and I think that the president himself, this is a big enough issue where the commission of inquiry that occupied Ghana and others have asked for ought to also come in place. Let's have a thorough understanding of how our systems have failed us.
I mean, Mary, so still on this matter with Sir John's purported will, you read the will itself and you see the allocations that they've done. We talk about the conflict of interest, possible conflict of interest situation. The SP possibly will be looking into this. From the anti-corruption point of view, the man is no more, right? He's dead now. He's late. Does that affect how the investigations will be carried out? For you, for example, if the man who is willing the thing away is no more, how does it change the dynamics for you in holding people accountable?
Thank you. I believe strongly that despite the fact that the man is not alive anymore, it is for best practice and also for posterity to determine that during the lifetime of somebody who was a public officer, when issues around conflict arose, when he was not able to delineate the difference between his personal and public interest. An investigation ensued, and some very good findings were made, or the determinations, let's suggest if they are made in our favor, would then guide the process going forward. Remember that in our petition and also in the will as it spells out, there are a lot of issues out there with beneficial owners, which Gilfred spoke to. And these are serious issues because the Companies Act of 2019 clearly spells out that public officers should act in a certain way. And because we wanted as a country to prevent the occurrence of public officers trying to use obscured methods to do business or to procure illegal assets for themselves, we clearly determined that in this nation, issues of around beneficial ownership was very important. And so we didn't stop there. We also indicated that persons who are people or persons that are exposed, politically exposed persons, should also be determined. And in this case, we realize that companies have been registered. And in the registration of the companies, we also identified that it is through these companies which now become vehicles which have been used to acquire the lands, and these lands are now being distributed. And so we need to be able to clearly, this would be cases, I'm not a lawyer, I think Martin would be able to speak to this. This would be a very good case for us to document that it happened practically, not just speaking in the theoretical sense, that a public officer during his lifetime tried to engineer some of this process to circumvent the processes that have been put in place to ensure that he didn't do what he was supposed to be doing. So for us, it is a good case going forward that the special prosecutor looks into it. The investigation goes beyond just Sir John because there are other interests involved. There is one who is mentioned, a certain Mr. Charles Owusu, and the various companies which have been mentioned, which you alluded to in your introductory remarks. So it's a good case going forward, and we hope and pray that this would go as quickly as possible, so that as civil society actors, as the media, and as a people, we would begin to then trust that the systems we have put in place to check some of these wrongdoings are beginning to take shape and are beginning to work in our interest.
I mean, Martin, please comment on that for me because you're a lawyer in this. How does the fact that the man at the heart of this himself is dead affect the investigations that SP may be undertaking?
Great. So, one thing for sure, because he's dead, he will not come to stand trial, okay? Yes. But as Mary has also answered brilliantly, even though Mary is not a lawyer, but she's given the answers, the investigation in itself is a tool of accountability. So let's step back a bit and then look at the subject of accountability. Accountability is not just that finally the person is serving a jail term of, let's say, 10 years. I mean, under the new corruption laws. No. Imprisonment is one. But even the fact that we are having this discussion, even this discussion itself, the fact that we are mentioning him, we are holding him to account. When you go in, when the investigations are commenced and his family relations are asked to come and answer, bring their documents, that is accountability. When the family relations are asked questions for them to answer for him, as far as they know, that is accountability. When Charles Owusu comes before the special prosecutor and also the angle about this conflict before Shraj, and he answers for Sir John, that is accountability. So it's all about accountability writ large. It's not just about the final jail term. Accountability does not just mean a jail term. Everything, when you are asked a question and you answer, is part of it. So it's good that we do it. Do you see that Evans, this is a very strong pushback on the fight, what do you call it, against corruption. You know, for some time, we weren't doing that well, but it looks like this case, the way, and the minister has done very well. I think we must commend him. The fact that, look, he's just come out straight away to say whatever they find is deemed confiscated. The Forestry Commission and Lands Commission should take steps. This is what we should have been doing all along. So it's all about accountability, whether Sir John is dead or is alive. Of course. So in this case, what we will not get is a jail term for him if the corruption aspect were the investigations were to find that he has a case to answer in court. Okay, but whatever we get out of it is good. In actual fact, so far so good.
Yeah, I mean, Gilfred, so you went to the SP. Let me ask you, so what is the end game here as far as the corruption watch is concerned? What do you want? Do you want prosecution, retrieval of property illegally acquired, or reforms, or all three?
Well, I think all three, if it works that way, that's fine. But the principal thing is to get everything be transparent. We need transparency. We need accountability. It may come up that nothing bad happened, and that's good. That is welcome. But we may also find out that people were culpable in this kind in this thing that happened. And if it happens so, then those people must be prosecuted if they are alive. We need reforms around this issue, and especially in relation to assets declaration. We don't know the full facts yet, so we wait for the special prosecutor to do the investigations and come up clear with their findings. But if we find some lacunas in how we are implementing some of these reforms or some of these laws, then definitely there must be a chance for us to go back to the drawing table and then see how we can best implement these reforms to ensure that the law bites. Already, I think some of the framework for implementation are weak. So if we find anything, it is better for us to go back and then reform the process and ensure that public officers who are entrusted with public resources are accountable for their actions and inactions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to you, Adam and Anna, Mary, shortly. But Martin, you commended the minister, but if you commended the minister, he raised the forthrightness, the energy, and of course what he had decided to do. He done a broad number of things, apart from giving information, but also announcing that beneficiaries will not go away with it. He was also indicated that he's going to go in with an audit into the acreage conversation. I'm coming to the acreage conversation. He wants an audit into the acreage conversation. And he's indicated that he's going to go back to past and present and those who have owned. I guess it begs the question, how broad should investigations be? And I think the minister has signaled in that you shouldn't just limit it to this period, but extend it. You agree with that view? You agree with the minister's approach to this, that extend it broadly? Because again, as I tracked, this has traveled a long bit and it keeps increasing. Do you agree with the minister's view that if you're looking at this holistically, don't limit it to a period, extend it beyond now?
Yes, Evans, 120%. I'm with the minister. It's good. And like I said, it's all about accountability rate large. So that, you see, all the persons who have benefited, and Evans, look, without equivocation, we can look into the crystal ball and say that more public officers are going to be caught in this web. That one, I mean, come on. We've been around for some time. More public officers are going to be caught in this web. Because, listen, Evans, you know it, I know it, all of us know it. Nobody is going to release government land back to pre-acquisition owners without that person benefiting. So it's good that he's going to do this. You see how many people will be caught in this web. And so what we should do is that, Evans, we need a lot of transparency, like what Gilbert and Mary have alluded to. perhaps the composition of the committee should be said that it should include somebody from civil society. Then it should include a journalist. They should sit in what do you call it, in public. You remember the Georgina Wood committee into the cocaine saga,
Yeah.
the ministry, and was it 2007 or so?
Yeah.
Yes. So they should sit in public. You know, like we always say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So let's give it a lot of sunshine. But what the minister is going to do is the best. So many people will be caught in the web. Then they will see that, oh yeah, now Ghana is changed or is really changing. Okay. So let's go for it. Broaden it as much as possible. And then, of course, you remember I already said that I'm into it for as many organizations or state institutions that want to weigh in. So Parliament can also take a decision that, look, they want a full-scale public inquiry. That's a commission of inquiry. That want to go for it. Because Evans, like you said, I like your use of the word energy. The minister has some new sense of energy, and it appears is becoming infectious. I'm sure someday we'll want to laud Mr. Jinapo for this. I hope he doesn't lose the momentum too soon, though. So there's a new sense of energy and urgency on the matter. So let's all jump on board and make sure that maybe we can make up for some of the losses we incurred in the past.
I mean, Adam, Senator, let's talk about that a bit more. Let's talk about the acreage conversation. Remember, there's the Sir John issue, which we've dealt with the petition. But then there's the original issue about the handing over the lands to the Owu family. And if you track it, how the acreage keeps on increasing. The scope of the investigations is important, is it not? I mean, the scope of the investigations is critical. We agree with Martin on that?
Absolutely. And I think that's a very fascinating story. I mean, yesterday I listened in when you took the figures, and then this evening with the chart. And the original thinking, yes, there's a legitimate request which we need to honor. The question in my mind is, who were the public servants, the technocrats, who put together the criteria and basis on which to arrive at which acreages? And why did we have so many mistakes, from prime forest area, which needs to be avoided, to very sensitive installations that need to be avoided? I mean, is there a sense in which those who were entrusted with this kind of assessment failed us by not taking into consideration all the right things right from the beginning, that we had 4, 5, 6, 7 changes, you know? I'm also curious as to some of the jumps, you know? I mean, I think right up to the 198 or so was clear, but from the 198 to the 300 and whatever, not too sure what happened in the middle belt there. So there is definitely a need to have a thorough assessment to understand right from the beginning to the end, capture it all. What were the systems we have in place that ought to have prevented where we find ourselves today? How do we improve upon them? And it would be good to know who are physically located in which spaces around the forest now. If you've already started building, that's a good sign. If you've not started building, but there are documents, and then the beneficial ownership also will be an interesting place to explore in order to understand this one. So the scope must be wide enough to raise all the angles that people will be interested in, such that we don't have a situation where subsequently people will be suspicious or think that something is still being hidden. It's an opportunity to make things good. And I think we should make sure that we seize it and do a good job of making sure that all the facts come up. I
mean, so, Mary, that is the key question, right? All the facts coming out. And I want to take us to the question about that Gilbert mentioned earlier, which and has come up very strongly too in the wake of the conversation, which is asset declaration. And many suggest that if the asset declaration regime was working effectively, we would not have to wait for the will of the late Sir John to be leaked before we get alarmed and start asking special prosecutor to investigate. Do you agree with that?
Certainly. Unfortunately, in our dispensation, we have a regime we passed in 1998, that's Act 550, that just provides for public officers of a certain category to declare their assets and liabilities. Unfortunately, we usually say just declaration of assets and we end there. It is very critical that people are also declaring their liabilities, and it spells out who to declare those assets to. Unfortunately, there is best practice which we are not complying with. As you mentioned, the UNCAG gives us some hints or pointers to which to do this. The OECD also has, I think the Asian community has one of the best practice examples of asset declaration regimes that exist. And recently we did an analysis of same, and we realized that our law, which we have been advocating for a change forever, is one of the weakest we have, because you just declare your assets, and until such a time that there is an issue where a competent authority, which is SHRAJ as provided by the Constitution, then goes in to assess and do an analysis. So our regime is weak. Our regime is a facilitator of some of these infractions that we clearly see. And if it is true what I have heard and read, I hear the gentleman did not even declare his assets in the first place per initial checks. If this is true, this is a big infraction. How come the appointing authority did not ensure that somebody they have appointed declared their assets? The Constitution says 3 months after the assumption of office, and Act 550 says 6 months after the assumption of office, and the same 6 months after you have left public office or the assigned office to which you were occupying. Today, if what we are hearing is true, then that's a big infraction, and there are sanctions that come with non-compliance as spelled out in the Constitution and also in the Act. We have other places, and I talk about best practice, where assets and liabilities that are declared are verified, and to push it published as well. Then the final stage is the monitoring of the assets and the liabilities, because people pick up or reduce their assets as they go on in life. And so if you have taken office today, even as a public officer, let me use you, for instance, 3 months after you have taken office, at a certain salary, you should declare your assets. And then when, during your tenure, whenever you acquire a new asset or a new liability, you quickly amend what you have presented to the Auditor General, who is the custodian of those assets. And it is the business of the Auditor General to then verify what you have brought, if they are correct, and if they are not correct, ask you to correct same. Unfortunately, our system is not like that. And let me quickly say that one of the good things we have done in this country is that we wanted a review that captured beyond just asset declaration. And so the new law, which we refer to as the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, captures issues around asset declaration. And there's some modicum of verification in there. And we also were pushing for issues around publication of the assets, which was strongly opposed to. I remember in the last parliament, this went through to the first reading, I think even the second reading. Unfortunately, the debate was not conclusive and it didn't get passed. We heard the president wanted that law to pass because it also captures the critical issue of conflict of interest, which we shouldn't be speaking to, because for now we know, because it's not criminalized, nobody can be held accountable for a public officer engaging in such behaviors, and we have had examples of that in the past. Unfortunately, this law is not passed. Yesterday, I heard Parliament lamenting about asset declaration, and I thought that was unfortunate because they had the opportunity to pass that law, which would have strengthened our regime and also even added the aspect of unexplained wealth, which we could go after public officers who have acquired certain properties which we cannot explain. Unfortunately, they didn't pass. I hope during the tenure of this parliament that law would get passed, and all of us will begin to utilize it.
Gilbert, at CDD, definitely, this moment is an opportunity, is it not? Because if the only, I guess, positive from all this is that are working at the reality of what happens when you have such a weak asset declaration regime. This can be an opportunity. Yesterday, and Mary was right, the majority leader himself, Osechi Misabosu, was on the floor referencing this incident and complaining about the asset declaration regime and asking for a review.
Well, certainly, this is a window for us to push for reform, as Mary has indicated. If we leave this gap, it will come back and bite us. And again, we are not benefiting as a nation, allowing these things to exist, these gaps that we know that clearly it leaves room for people to exploit our limited resources. So I think, yes, it's a good opportunity for all of us to go back and visit the laws and to revisit the old conversations that we have had. We don't need to reinvent the wheels, as you stated. There are lots of good practices around that as a country, if we are serious about fighting corruption, if we are serious about preserving the integrity of state institutions and even public office, and if we are serious about leaving some good legacies for the generations to come, then we must show that by taking some of these bold steps and making reforms that will have serious implications on the fight against corruption in this country.
Adam said, I know, very broadly though, there has been a suggestion that we should have a presidential commission. I guess what I'm pushing at is, broadly, what is the best approach to resolving the issues in a way that also sees reforms, institutional reforms, legal reforms, and the way, say, land return to families, the transparency in the process, etc., at the end of this all?
Well, I guess that it will depend on the findings at the end of the day. And so, first of all, the multiplicity of investigations is good, but the specific findings would then determine which responsible parties need to act. If you listen to what Mary just said, obviously, even without doing the investigation, one of the areas we should be highlighting, probably pushing for Parliament to go back to the Public Officers Code of Conduct bill and make sure they do justice to that. That already begins to strengthen the framework we are talking about. Depending on what comes up with the special prosecutor or judge looking at conflict of interest, looking at the mechanisms, is it just an issue of Forestry Commission's own implementation of what the law is, who there ought to have been the custodian of the process and ensure that the right thing is done? So depending on what comes up, it will then determine that, okay, it's at the institutional level, maybe it's Forestry Commission that has failed. Other institutions are doing much better on issues such as this. But if it's bigger than that and it's national level, then you're probably looking at Parliament or maybe the Auditor General, depending on what aspect of it comes up. So there may be a different set of issues, and we just need to identify the specific duty bearers, so to speak, who ought to act to make the changes that will ensure that going forward we have a stronger system in order to prevent these kinds of lapses and fraudulent actions.
Okay, so I hear all of you saying that a multiplicity of the institutions looking into this is good. And a final thought to you, Martin. So what, a presidential commission, a parliamentary probe, the special prosecutors probe? the minister's own internal audit, all four happening at the same time, if indeed we come to it, you say it's best for this?
Exactly, Evans. Exactly. There can't be any better time than this. It's good. Let all the four zoom in. Don't forget, the higher the number, then the less chances that somebody can just, don't forget, as the investigations go on, people will call people in the deep of the night. Hey, this one is our son. This year, if you reveal this guy, you're going to embarrass our society, our community, and all that. So the higher the number of institutions, the better. That in itself serves as a bulwark against some of the influences that the investigators will come across. Okay, so it's all good. Evans, remember the American one, as I stated at the beginning. 7 institutions investigated Donald Trump's elections as to whether there was foreign influence, and they all came out with their findings. So let's go for it. Okay, maybe at the end of this, we'll see that even before the institutions get started, you see that there's a new sense of excitement, and like the word you use, the right word, the energy the minister is brought into it. Yes, let's ride on it. Okay, there's no turning back.
I'm grateful, Martin. Martin Kpebu is a lawyer. Adam Senanu, co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. Mary Ada, Senior Programs and Research Officer with the Ghana Integrity Initiative. And Gilfred Isiama is with the CDD. Enjoy the rest of your evening.